Year 1879 to Norfolk, England in the year of our Lord 1879. On a bitterly windswept corner of the Norfolk coast, there stood a house so old the stones forgot who laid them. Wren Hollow Hall, they called it, though no one in the village remembered a wren, nor dared walk past its gates after sundown. They said the lamps never burned there, that its windows remained dark even in spring. But strange as it was, it had one faithful occupant. Her name was Miss Adeliza Crown. She was 17 when she came to the hall, cloaked in widow's black, though she'd never married. Some claimed she was a ward of the late Lady Halverton, whose will mentioned a child raised in grace and silence. Others whispered that Adeliza had no kin, that she had wandered in from the marshes the very hour Lady Halverton died. She had the look of someone painted rather than born skin pale like bleached parchment, and a brow so high it seemed carved from stone. The older women in town remembered the old ways, and they muttered that the girl's beauty was not of this world. "It's the fashion of the dead," one said, watching Adeliza pass beneath her parasol, face unreadable. The old church days, the ones who prayed too long and smiled too little. Twice a week, she came to the village on a coal cart, pulled by a driver who did not speak. She never bought meat, nor bread, nor any of the hearty things one might live on. Only vinegar, rosewater, chalk powder, and dried sage leaves. At the apothecary she requested ground pearl and lead-white paste. The old man behind the counter gave her the goods, but never met her eyes. She never spoke above a whisper. That year, Miss Crown took on an apprentice of sorts, a village girl named Mercy Flint, the daughter of a washerwoman. Mercy had clever hands, and a hunger to rise above her station. When the invitation came, pressed between sheets of parchment, and sealed with bone wax, her mother protested. But the girl was of an age where such things don't matter. She went to Wren Hollow without so much as a glance back. The next time Mercy was seen, it was at Michaelmas, and she looked changed. Her skin had gone pale, but not sickly, no, it gleamed. Her forehead, once fringed with wild auburn curls, was clean and high. Too high. "She's learned refinement," said the rector's wife, though even she crossed herself afterward. Mercy did not stay long in the village. She came for candles, wool thread, and sometimes small glass bottles. She never laughed any more. The baker's boy tried to joke with her once, and she merely turned her face to the wall and muttered something in Latin. The villagers whispered among themselves. They remembered the old beliefs about what a high forehead meant in the time before photographs. It meant purity, they said. It meant grace, but too much grace could chill the soul. "She's being turned into one of them paintings," muttered the blacksmith's wife. "Not a girl at all. Just something for show." Inside Wren Hollow Hall, the world was frozen in a different century. There were no clocks, only candlemass. Mirrors were polished, not silvered. And the largest of them all a bronze mirror so warped, it showed your soul before your skin hung in the upstairs parlor. Behind a velvet curtain, that mirror had belonged to Lady Halverton herself, and some said it dated back to the days when monks lived in the stone cloisters of the marsh. No one outside the hall had seen it, but children whispered about it in the schoolhouse. They said Miss Crown sat before it every night, not to admire herself, but to see if she was fading. They said it reflected not your beauty, but your obedience. It was Mercy who first spoke of it, one snowy afternoon, in the schoolhouse yard, when she met her younger brother through the fence. "The mirror," she told him, eyes wide and fever bright, "it only shows you once you've made yourself worthy. Otherwise, it just shows shadow." That winter, the village women started finding strange things in their daughters' drawers, rusted with use. Pebbles soaked in vinegar, rose stems snapped clean of petals. One girl was caught sucking on a lemon and confessed she'd heard it made your cheeks sink beautifully. The mothers blamed novels. The priest blamed Paris. But none dared blame Miss Crown. Then came the Feast of Candlemas. On that night, Mercy did not return to the village. The coal cart came alone, carrying only a message. The note was addressed to the good wives of Wicklow Parish, and written in ink, so faded it might have been water. It read, "A young woman's face is her silence made visible. Let her not spoil it with laughter, nor corrupt it with color. Let her be still, and she shall be lovely." By Lent, 2 more village girls had gone to Wren Hollow Hall. The rector tried to protest, but his own niece was among them, and all through spring. A low veil of fog hung over the hall, even when the fields bloomed bright with daffodils. By summer, Wren Hollow Hall was no longer a house on the hill. It had become a shrine. The villagers didn't speak of it outright, but everyone watched. They watched the candle smoke that drifted from the chimneys in the still evenings. They watched the black carriage that came once a month, drawn by velvet-coated horses, never making a sound. And they watched the girls three now, for by midsummer emerge in thin veils and quiet slippers, their hairlines high, their eyes rimmed with shadow, their mouths so small it looked as though they'd never spoken a word. Only the children still dared run past the iron gates. They'd say things they didn't understand, chants passed down from older siblings. "Mind your mouth," they'd whisper, giggling, or Miss Crownstitch it shut with lace thread. The lace was part of it now. The girls of the Hall Mercy, Annie's Lark, and little Judith were seen often in the village haberdashery, selecting lengths of cream ribbon and blue-white netting, not to wear, but to embroider. They brought sample Steiny cuffs, sheer veils, collars with patterns so fine they looked like frost. The shopkeeper once complimented Judith on a pattern. She blinked and said only, "We make them for our throats. It keeps temptation away." When asked what that meant, she just stared, pale as wax, and said no more. That July, something changed. The schoolmaster's wife went missing. Her name was Ellen Pryor, a sensible woman with a plain face and an honest laugh. Her disappearance sent a ripple through the town. She wasn't a girl. She was 36, a mother of two. Not someone who'd fall under any spell. But they found her bonnet caught on a bramble near the Wren Hollow fence, and the buttons torn from her traveling cloak. They searched the moor, the fields, the hall's perimeter. Nothing. That Sunday, as the rector gave sermon, he paused halfway. Through the reading, Judith had appeared at the back of the church, not dressed as she usually was, in sober gray or soot black, but in soft ivory silk, with a circlet of pearl-colored net drawn across her brows, like a second skin. She stood through the sermon without blinking, and then she left. By Monday, the whispers were louder. "They're not girls anymore," said Mrs. Cavell, who once taught Lark her letters. "They're shades, dolls carved from old commandments." Even the vicar stopped sending his boy with tithe letters up the road. It was no longer simply a place of oddities. It was a place of transformation, of something deeper than fashion. The hall did not simply house girls, it remade them. Mercy had once told her brother about the bronze mirror. Now, the children said, it no longer showed shadow. It showed their futures. "She says if you look long enough, it teaches you how to hide everything," said a boy who had snuck to the fence. "Not just your smile, but your hunger too." No one asked what kind of hunger he meant. That harvest, the first frost, came early. One morning, the farmers found a row of strange symbols burned into the field's edge shapes, like needles, like candles, like women kneeling. The earth beneath was dry, cracked white like bone. And that very same night, Adelisa Crown was seen, walking alone through the town for the first time. She moved like parchment carried by wind. Her dress was the color of milk. Her hair was gathered into a snood, so fine it looked woven from smoke. And in her gloved hand she held a candle, unlit. Not one soul dared speak to her. The dogs didn't bark. The horses didn't stir. Her eyes were downcast as she passed, and yet every door she passed felt colder for her presence. The blacksmith's infant wailed for hours after she was gone, as though sensing something foul had passed too near the hearth. By All Hallows' Eve, the town's girls had stopped wearing rouge. By Christmas, the mirror was said to be waking people from sleep. That winter was hard. The river froze straight through. Babies were born weak, and the men found their tools rusting faster than ever. But worse than all of it was the silence. It clung to Wicklow like a wet blanket. Even the children grew quiet, no longer singing rhymes or chasing crows. The world felt watched, and the hall. It glowed at night now. Some said the light came from candles, others whispered it came from the girls themselves, that their skin had grown so thin with all the pastes and vinegar. Baths that they now gleamed from within. No one dared go close, But come 12th night, the youngest girl in the village, Eliza Thorne, was caught at the hall's edge, scratching her arms bloody in the bramble hedge. When the constable pulled her free, she kept whispering a single phrase through cracked lips. "I want to see it. I want to see who I'm meant to be." Her mother begged her to explain. Eliza only lifted her gaze, and in it was the same dull grace found in Adelisa's mirror girls. "She saw it in a dream," said the doctor. "A mirror that teaches you to vanish." The first girl to speak again was Annie's. It happened on a Thursday, just after the frost had turned the moss in the churchyard to silver glass. She'd wandered down from Wren Hollow alone, without bonnet or gloves, hair pinned high in the court, style but trailing loose, frost clinging to the hem of her skirt. She stepped into the postmaster's shop and said only one word: "Thread." Mr. Godfrey, who'd never heard her voice before, dropped his inkpot. She stared through him like a figure from a page too composed, too thin, too drained of warmth to be alive in any ordinary sense. Her hands trembled just once when he handed her the twine-spooled silk. Then she left without paying. By the time anyone followed, she was already gone up the road, barefoot. After that, people started locking their doors before sunset. The hall's reputation had twisted. It was no longer simply a house of discipline and old beauty. It had become a threshold, a passageway between girlhood and something else, entirely something shaped like grace, but hollow underneath. The veil of refinement now seemed like a mask, and the villagers began to wonder what, exactly, lay beneath it. Mercy, who had once been quick with a smile and a joke, was now the sternest of the four. When the doctor's wife spotted her near the stream and asked after her health, Mercy only pressed a finger to her lips and walked away. Some said the mirror had given her a vision of her death, and that she was preparing for it like a bride. Others said she was already dead, kept whole by habit and powder. One man, a traveling bishop from Suffolk, tempted to visit Wren Hollow that winter. He carried a satchel of holy water and 3 pages of Latin prayer. The village children watched him climb the stone path. The front door opened without sound. He did not return. The hall, however, sent back his coat. It was folded perfectly and left on the church steps 2 days later, dry despite the rain. Inside the pocket was a strip of parchment that read, "Only the emptied vessel may reflect divine stillness." By February, a thick fog had rolled in off the fen and refused to leave. It clung to boots and windows, to hedges and skin, muffling everything. The sun no longer shone directly on Wren Hollow. Its roof glinted now and then like slate soaked in milk, but no real light seemed to touch the grounds, and it was in this hush, this suspended world, that Lark vanished. She had gone to the haberdashery for pearl pins. Mercy had sent her alone. It was a test, Judith said later. When all of them had passed, Lark, it seemed, had failed. She didn't make it back to the hall, nor did she go home. The townsfolk searched the woodlands. The constable walked the moors. The priest sent word to Norwich. Nothing, not a boot print, not a thread, just her pearl pins laid neatly on the window ledge of the schoolhouse, arranged like stars. A week passed, then another dot. Judith, the youngest, was seen burning something. In a garden brazier, behind the hall, a ledger. Some said it held Lark's name. Mercy wept openly in the stream near the willow grove. Not for the missing girl, but for what she'd revealed too soon. What that meant, no one knew. That spring, something shifted again. The mirror, locked behind its velvet curtain, was now spoken of openly. "She showed it to us by candlelight," whispered Eliza Thorne, the girl who'd clawed her arms, but only when we'd earned silence. She said the mirror was not fixed, that it changed depending on who looked into it. For Mercy, it showed a nun's cell, high walls and echoing bells. For Judith, a lake without a reflection. For herself, she could not say, only that her tongue tasted of iron for days after. Some girls, she said, never come out of its light, the same shape. She had told this to the baker's son. When his mother asked him to repeat it, he simply wept. By late March, the first lambs of the season were born with odd markings, dark stripes across their brows, as if the mothers had brushed them with soot. The vicar blessed the flock, but they grew sickly fast. as if something in the wind itself had turned sour. Then came the lightning storm. It rolled in from the east, thick and purple, without thunder. Just flash after flash of white sky, illuminating the hall like a stage. And in one brief, blinding strike, a silhouette was seen in the upper chamber. A figure standing before the mirror, arms raised. Some swore it wasn't one of the girls. It was taller, broader, older. Miss Crown, she hadn't been seen in weeks, not since Candlemas. Some believed she'd passed into the mirror itself. Others claimed she'd never left the chamber. But that night, she moved again. And the next morning, the hall's great doors were found wide open. Not a soul inside. No Mercy, no Judith, no Adelisa Crown. Not even the smell of beeswax. Just the mirror. It had been pulled from its wall, dragged to the center of the parlor, and placed upright like a gate. Upon its surface were 7 faint fingerprints in a trail of dried salt. No one has dared step through, but on certain nights, when the fog is thin and the wind still, some say the mirror glows from within. And if you wait long enough, you'll see your own reflection not as you are, but as the world expects you to be. Perfect, silent, gone. Wren Hollow Hall remained empty, or so it seemed. The front doors were closed again by April, sealed with iron nails and brushwood. Ivy began its slow climb back across the stone, and moss crept over the windows like skin reclaiming a wound. The townspeople never discussed going up again. Whatever had stirred in that house had quieted, but not gone. One man, drunk on May Day, boasted he'd broken in, said he'd touched the mirror by summer. His face had gone pale and pinched. He stopped speaking to anyone and walked barefoot through the town, muttering to himself in strange verse. The children called him the bleached man. He died before midsummer, his hair white, his mouth sewn shut by his own hand. Or so the midwife swore. That same month, the fog lifted but only partially. It still hung over the hall like a curtain, as if the air itself remembered. No one heard from Mercy again. Judith's name was never listed in the school registers. Eliza Thorne stopped speaking altogether. But in the village, changes remained. Girls now kept their faces to themselves. Lips stayed closed, voices soft, hairlines high. Mothers discouraged, smiling. Mirrors were covered with cloth. And at the apothecary, the shelves that once stocked lead-white paste and rose vinegar were bare before the week's end. The rector gave a sermon in June titled "The Dangers of Devotion," but half the pews were empty. The older women said nothing. The younger ones listened in silence, and still the mirror waits. Wren Hollow's windows reflect no sky now. They are silvered with silence. But those who pass too close claim they hear tapping, faint and careful, as if from glass behind the wall. They say it's not someone trying to get out, it's someone inviting you. In 1903, long after the last, snow fell on Wren Hollow Hall. A box was discovered in the attic of the old haberdashery in Wicklow. It was wrapped in oilcloth and hidden behind a rotted beam. The shopkeeper, a nervous man named Fenwick Hall, was clearing out for renovation when his foot broke through a brittle patch of flooring and struck the box. Inside, linen-bound pages, water-stained and hand-stitched at the spine. The writing within was in faded brown ink, a looping, practiced hand. Across the first page, scrawled in shaky letters, "For whomever remains untouched." What followed was the diary of Annie's Wren, the second girl Adelisa Crown took into the hall. She would have been 14 in 1879. The journal covered a single year-end, the unraveling of a soul. March 3rd. Miss Crown showed us the mirror today. It's heavier than it looks. Bronze frame. The surface doesn't shine, not like real glass. It pulls light inward, like water that doesn't want you to see the bottom. I don't like it. Mercy says that's natural. We don't come to the mirror to like what we see, she said. We come to be corrected. I said I didn't feel wrong. Mercy just smiled. April 12th. We don't sleep now, not the way we used to. There's a tea we drink, made of poppy and thorn root. It slows things down, makes your tongue feel fat and still. It helps. The silence matters. The mirror doesn't respond to chatter, only stillness. Judith can sit before it for hours. Sometimes she hums, very soft, like air through a reed. That's the only sound Miss Crown allows. I caught Lark whispering a poem once, and Miss Crown slapped her mouth with an embroidery hoop. She bled into her teeth and thanked her. May 7th. We've begun learning lace code. It's not just sewing. It's speech. Veil work, she calls it. Each stitch is a letter. Patterns tell prayers. We wear them over our throats now, so we never forget what silence protects us from. The tongue is the gate of ruin, Miss Crown says. Beauty is measured in restraint. June 1st. I saw something in the mirror. Not my reflection. Not exactly. It moved when I didn't. It smiled when I flinched. It reached its fingers up to my face and traced the skin below my eyes. I felt it like frost across bone. Miss Crown told me, that's your final self. If you let it, it will teach you to survive the ugliness of wanting. June 30th. Judith hasn't eaten in 4 days. She says the hunger is part of the lesson. Each ache is a thread, she whispered. To me, soon will be whole cloth. July 14th. Eliza Thorne came again. She is too young, but Miss Crown doesn't send her away. She's quiet. Her eyes bleed often. The mirror takes something from her, but she keeps returning. I want to be made clean, she says. Like snow, like mercy. But even mercy doesn't smile now. She just watches. Watches us. Watches herself. August 2nd, there was a visitor. A man from the parish council. He came to speak with Miss Crown. When he left, he was trembling. That night, we added another candle to the circle. The flame was redder than usual. August 31st, Lark is gone, not dead, not vanished. She is here, but when she speaks, it isn't. Her voice, it sounds like something underwater, something distant and flat. She walks in perfect circles and hums through her teeth. September 17th, Miss Crown touched my cheek today. She said, "You're nearly perfect. All that remains is for you to forget you were ever anything else." October 5th, I found Judith at the mirror last night, long past the hour of prayer. She was writing something in the condensation letters with her finger, backwards. When I turned the lantern toward the glass, I saw what she'd written. "Let me out then," she screamed. But no sound came. Miss Crown came and took her away. I have not seen her since. October 31st. I have hidden this book. The mirror listens now. Not just sees listens. It hears when we think of rebellion, of escape, of memory. I tried to look away during prayer today. My eyes filled with tears. I imagined my mother's hands sewing breadcloths in the spring. The glass went black. When I looked again, my mother's face had been torn open and resewn with white thread. November 9th. I have one hope left, to leave this for someone. Anyone. Miss Crown will become more than a woman if we let her. She is already folding into legend. A kind of cold god for those of us who were told beauty meant silence, and silence meant safety. She will feed on that belief long after we are lace and ash. Do not trust mirrors, and never speak her name out loud. That was the last page. The diary was sold at auction in 1905, catalogued as Victorian Girls' Hall Journal, likely fictional. Its location is now unknown, but on the highest hill of Wicklow, when fog rolls, and just right, a faint light still burns behind shuttered windows. A low hum, like silk sliding over skin, drifts down into the town, and sometimes, when a girl passes a mirror alone, she sees something behind her, smiling. Dr. Thalia Quinn didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in archival integrity, carbon dating, and the sweet, predictable texture of dry vellum beneath cotton gloves. Her doctorate sat framed in her office at King's College London, awarded for her exhaustive work on women's domestic training in Victorian England. She had never heard of Adeliza Crown. Not until a package arrived in the mailroom. Addressed in cramped handwriting, Dr. Thalia Quinn, Department of History, King's College, London. No return address. Just an oilcloth-wrapped box, sealed with a waxy red smudge. Inside, a stack of yellowed pages stitched with linen thread. The diary of one Annie's Wren, apparently at first glance. It seemed like the typical Victorian confection: spiritual madness, beauty cults, mirrors and lace, Too perfect. Too ... Gothic. But the ink had soaked into the fibers with unsettling realism. She'd seen plenty of fakes. This one bled authenticity. The first line was what caught her. For whomever remains unfit to Leah, set the pages. A side oddly cold, despite the spring sun outside her window. Her hands trembled slightly. Nonsense, she thought. But she didn't pick the journal up again until 2 days later. When she did, she read it all in one sitting. Then she read it again. She couldn't explain it. Not academically, at least. But the air in her office changed while she read. Grew heavier. She turned off the overhead light and left only her desk lamp burning. A strange hum filled her ears the longer she looked at the page. Almost like singing, she muttered aloud. She snapped the book shut. Within a week, she found herself in WICK. LOW. It wasn't on any modern map. Technically, it wasn't a town anymore. The train let her off at a station called Briarknot, where the platform had weeds sprouting through stone, and the only signage was etched in rust. Woman in a navy cloak met her there. Dr. Quinn. I didn't arrange for a car, Talia said. The woman didn't answer, just turned and walked toward an idling black motor. The driver didn't look at Talia, just opened the back door and kept his eyes fixed forward. The seat smelled like lavender and ash. She tried to speak several times on the ride to ask who'd sent the package, or how they knew her research. But every question caught in her throat. The road narrowed until brambles tapped the windows like bony fingers. The driver stopped at a hill dot at its crest, a long-forgotten building with a pitched slate roof, thin iron spires, and a silhouette that seemed to press against the sky itself. Wren. Hollow Hall. Inside, time hadn't passed. Dust covered everything, but the furniture sat precisely arranged. A brass samovar stood cold on the tea tray. 7 chairs ringed the parlor hearth, each with a lace veil folded neatly over the backrest, and on the wall, the mirror it hadn't tarnished. Thalia stared at it. She hated herself for expecting some monstrous trick, a ghostly hand, or a reflection that didn't match, but it was worse than that. It was completely inert. It looked back at her as if to say, "You're not ready." She walked the house alone. Her boots creaked on floorboards that felt too damp, too soft. Upstairs, the bedrooms were preserved like museum dioramas. Small writing, desks, ivory-handled brushes, bolts of lace in woven baskets in one room. She found a stitched sampler nailed above the bed. The thread was red dotted red. "I forget my face, so I may wear another." That night, she returned to the diary. The last page, November 9th, had begun to fade, even though she was certain it hadn't been blank before. Beneath Annie's Wren's writing, a new line now appeared. "She's looking for you." Thalia didn't sleep. She wandered the halls, trying to tell herself it was research, looking for secret compartments, loose floorboards, anything. But all she found was a length of ribbon pinned to a doorframe. It was damp. When she returned to the mirror, she noticed something she hadn't before. In the corner of the frame, where the bronze had dulled, was a set of tiny etched initials, a dot, C. Talia knelt, pulled out her notebook, and copied it down. The moment she looked back up, her reflection was not in the mirror. Instead, a girl with tightly braided hair and sunken eyes stood where she should have been. The girl did not blink, her head tilted slightly, not curious, but expectant. Thalia stumbled back. The girl lifted her hand slowly and placed it flat against the other side of the glass. Thalia found her hand rising to match it. There was no cold, no heat, no sensation at all, just pressure. At dawn, she awoke in the chair by the hearth. The mirror was gone, not shattered, not cracked, gone. The wall behind it was unmarked, as if it had never hung there at all. The journal, too, was missing. So was her notebook. She rushed outside. The car was gone. The road had vanished. All that remained was the mist. She screamed, but the mist swallowed her voice. Back in London, Talia's colleagues received a final message. It arrived weeks later by post, unsigned, containing only a photograph. It showed the parlor room of Wren. Hollow Hall. On the far wall, the mirror had returned, and in its surface, reflected in perfect clarity, Dr. Talia Quinn, smiling. but her eyes were not her own. The woman calling herself Dr. Thalia Quinn arrived at King's College on a rainy Thursday morning in April. She wore the same navy trench coat she had before, carried the same leather satchel over her shoulder, and greeted her colleagues with the same soft, clipped accent they remembered. But those who knew her well, particularly Dr. Sims, in the neighboring office, noticed something different. She blinked too slowly, Sims later said, and when I asked about her Wicklow trip, she said it was restorative. Thalia would never say that. She hates that kind of vague nonsense. That same day, she gave a lecture. The students were riveted. Not because the material was new. Victorian finishing schools were not an especially exciting topic, because of the way she spoke. One student described it as sing-songy, like a nursery rhyme made of secrets. Another, it was like listening to someone remember your dreams before you do. No one could explain why, but more students attended her next lecture than any before. She started a new research project soon after. It wasn't university-sponsored. She told her department it was personal, an exploration into regional cult behavior, particularly among young women in isolated environments. Her proposal included references to obscure cases in Eastern Europe, a few footnotes from faded Swiss asylum records, and vague allusions to shared delusional identity. But behind the locked door of her office, she worked only from a single source, a small black-bound journal that never left her sight. On its spine, a faint embossed symbol, a handprint. She began to request antique mirrors from auctions, said she needed them for comparative visual culture studies. The university paid for them, unaware by summer. There were 13 in her office, each one arranged like a chapel of glass, across campus. Dr. Sims grew concerned. Thalia stopped attending department meetings. Her email replies became cryptic, always ending with variations of the same phrase. The face we wear is never the first. Lacey's memory made visible. They've waited long enough. Sims visited her one day without warning. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and soot. The windows were shut, but the curtains moved. And on the wall, dozens of drawings, pinned edge to edge, showing different young women in profile. Each wore the same expression, open-mouthed eyes, empty, as though mid-whisper. Thalia stood, with her back to him, humming, when she turned. Her eyes did not reflect the office lights. They gleamed like polished stone. "Have you met her yet?" she asked. Sims backed out, made excuses, left trembling. He filed a report with the university that afternoon. But the next morning, Thalia Quinn resigned her post. She left no forwarding address. In a market town outside York, a girl named Frances Lyle found a mirror at a charity sale. It was oval, with a filigree frame, delicate and barbed like frozen vines. The vendor said it came from a house clearing in Ireland. Frances paid £10 for it. She hung it above her desk that night. She wrote in her diary, "I don't know why I like it so much. It's strange. I keep looking at it even when I'm not facing it, like it's watching my back. But not in a scary way. In a proud way." She stopped writing for a week. Then, 7 days later, "Sometimes I see another me, not me, now me better. Like I've grown up into someone worth looking at, like I matter. I'm starting to wear my hair back like hers. It suits me." The last entry, dated May 3rd, read, "She wants me to go to school, but not the one I'm in. She says the real classroom is a place called Hollow. I'm ready. I've packed my ribbon." Frances Lyle was never seen again. In November, a podcast aired an episode titled "The Finishing Glass: England's Forgotten Beauty Cults." The host, a history grad named Jonah Marek, had stumbled upon an obscure Reddit thread referencing crowns, disciples, and the Wicklow girls. The poster linked to a Google Drive folder of photos, newspaper clippings, and a voice memo. The memo featured a whispering voice. "I remember my face only as a dream. She wears it now. She wears them all." The podcast went viral, but when listeners slowed the audio and played it backward, they heard a second voice underneath the whispering. This one was clearer. It said, "Thalia Quinn is not Thalia Quinn." That winter, 6 new antique mirrors were reported stolen from a museum shipment in Kent. The police traced the delivery to a warehouse, but it had burned to the ground. Fire inspectors found no accelerants, no origin point, just charred beams, and scorched glass near the center of the wreckage. They recovered one item intact, a sampler embroidered in red thread. It read, "The Grace You Earn." The linen cloth slipped from the mirror with a whisper. Elsie did not move. She sat cross-legged on the attic rug, spine straight, hands folded in her lap like a girl at vespers. Her nightgown was too thin for the Scottish chill, but she did not feel the cold anymore. The glass was black at first. No reflection, no flickering candlelight. Just dark, as though someone had replaced the silver with velvet. Then a shape. Surface faint. Feminine. It was not Elsie, the girl in the mirror wore. A bodice stitched with dozens of tiny pearls, each one dyed the faint gray of rain. Her hair was plaited in the old way, looped and twisted over her ears like a crown. Her eyes, though, were strange. They shimmered as if painted in oil, too glossy, too deep. "Do you know who I am?" the figure asked. Her lips did not move, but the question rang out clearly in the attic air. Elsie nodded. "Say it," the girl said gently. "Adeliza Crown." The mirror pulsed once, a ripple, like a breath against the surface. "You have been faithful," Adeliza said. "You waited without knowing. You sang without being taught. You remembered before you were born. This pleases me." Elsie flushed. "I want to go," she whispered. "To Hollow." The mirror girl tilted her head. "Do you know what Hollow is?" Elsie hesitated. "A school," she said, "where the proper girls learn." Adeliza gave a smile so small it nearly vanished. "Hollow is not a school. Hollow is what remains when all falseness is peeled away, when names and homes and mothers are dust, when lace is not costume, but skin." Elsie did not understand all of it, but she didn't need to. Her heart was thrumming in her chest, like a second voice. "I'll do it," she said. "I'll go." Adeliza's face softened. "Then your first lesson begins now." Downstairs, Elsie's aunt Miss Clara Greylow's reading in the parlor. She had taken the girl in 6 months prior, after a fire consumed the house Elsie was born in. The child had survived without so much as a scratch. Clara had called it a miracle. The girl never cried, never asked questions, never even mentioned the loss of her parents. A strong child, she told herself, stoic. But over time, Clara began to worry. Elsie was too still, too quiet. Her eyes followed movement too carefully, and she had a habit of standing in front of the hallway mirror for long periods, not fidgeting or playing, just staring, sometimes whispering. That night, Clara noticed the attic light flickering under the door. She rose from her chair, set her book down and climbed the narrow staircase. "Elsie," she called softly. "Sweetheart, are you awake?" No answer. The door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open. The air inside was freezing like a cellar. Candles lined the floor, and Elsie, her little niece, stood barefoot in the middle of it, all her face entirely blank. "Darling," Clara stepped forward. "What are you doing?" Elsie turned slowly. Behind her, the mirror was uncovered. For a second only, a second, Clara saw something move in the glass. A woman, pale and distant. Not a reflection, but a presence. Then it was gone. Elsie blinked. "I'm learning," she said. Clara didn't sleep that night. The next day, Elsie was different, more attentive, brighter. She made tea before Clara asked. She ironed her own dresses. She spoke of ribbons and starching techniques. She even curtsied. But it was the way she sat poised, deliberate, that disturbed Clara most. Like the child had been replaced by a mimic. That week, Clara visited the village rector. She told him everything. The mirror, the voice, the strange. Girl reflected. He said she was overwrought. That grief could twist a child's behavior. Still, he gave her a small crucifix. "For peace of mind," he said. Clara returned home, hung it over the mirror. It fell by morning. The hook snapped, clean in half. Elsie no longer answered when spoken to during meals. She hummed instead. Old-fashioned tunes, music box melodies, with no source Clara could find. She began folding her napkin into perfect fans. She set her hair each night with water and pins, and she always sat in the attic for precisely 1 hour after sundown. Clara finally locked the attic door. That evening, she heard footsteps above her head. When she rushed up, key in hand, the room was empty. The mirror was uncovered again. The linen cloth lay in the fireplace, unburned but warm. Elsewhere, the name Hollow was surfacing, in a boarding school outside Antwerp. 2 girls whispered about it after lights out. In a convent in Reims, a novice drew the word in the dust with her finger dot in Boston. A retired professor woke, screaming from a dream in which a ribbon tightened until it carved the word Hollow into her neck. The old order was reawakening, and Adeliza Crown was no longer content with 1 mirror at a time. Back in Scotland, Clara resolved to end it. She waited until Elsie had gone to bed. Then, with a hammer in hand, she climbed to the attic. She stood before the mirror. It no longer reflected her face. It showed a roomstone, walled and arched, like a cloister. Dozens of girls sat in rows. Each wore the same pearl gray dress. Each stared straight ahead, motionless dot in the center. A woman sat on a throne of braided hair. Adeliza. Clara raised the hammer. "I'm not afraid of you," she said. The mirror shimmered, and behind Clara, Elsie's voice spoke. "She says you will be." Clara turned, startled, but the attic was empty. When she faced the mirror again, it reflected only her. Hammer raised, eyes wide. She blinked and smashed it. The mirror shattered. The candles blew out. The attic darkened, and then quietly came a sound like laughter, not from the glass, not from the rafters, from inside her, a single clear voice. "Now you've let her out." It was the birds that stopped first. Clara Gray woke to a silence, so unnatural it rang in her ears. No dot from the trees, no rustle of sparrows beneath the eaves. Even the old cuckoo clock downstairs had failed to call the hour. She rose from bed, wrapped a shawl tight about her shoulders, and made her way to the attic. The door was open. The shards of mirror still lay scattered across the floorboards, but they no longer glinted. Their surfaces had dulled to soot black, as though something had been scraped from beneath the glass. Clara bent to gather the largest pieces. They were warm, not just warm, feverish. She dropped them, heart hammering. "Elsie." She called out, "Sweetheart, come down." No answer. She found the girl outside, in the morning fog, barefoot on the lawn. Elsie was wearing a gray dress Clara had never seen before. The sleeves were tight to the wrist. The skirt was pleated, with brutal perfection, and her hair was wrapped in a coiled braid that shimmered with ribbons of silver. She turned when Clara approached. Her eyes were darker, not red or sickly, just deeper, as if shadows had settled behind the irises. "I'm ready," Elsie said. "For what?" Clara whispered. "To go back." She gestured toward the trees that, half obscured in the mist, stood agate. It had never been there before. Or perhaps it had always been there, just unseen. Iron, rustles as elegant, with the letters H.S. curled into its crown. "Hollow School." Clara took a step back. "This is wrong," she said. "This isn't real." Elsie tilted her head. "Did you think breaking the mirror would stop her?" Clara's voice faltered. "Yes." Elsie smiled. "She wanted you to." The gate opened without sound. On the other side, no path led forward, just a meadow blanketed in white heather, and in the distance, the faint silhouette of a tower with a domed roof like a bridal veil. Clara hesitated, but Elsie walked forward. The grass never bent beneath her feet. Clara watched as the girl vanished into the fog. She should have run, instead. She stepped through the gate, inside the tower. The girls were already gathering. Some had come alone, led by instinct, old songs, or dreams. Others had been summoned, appearing at the gates with nothing but a ribbon in hand and a name on their tongue. Each wore a gray dot. Each moved with the grace of lessons, never taught in the grand hall. Adeliza Crown watched from her throne of woven hair, and laced out she was no longer just a ghost in glass. She had form now, flesh braided from spellwork and memory. Her skin was smooth, her lips pale, her nails lacquered in bone white. and her voice no longer needed mirrors. She spoke directly. "Welcome home, daughters of the Hollow." Clara followed the girl through the mist, past an orchard where every tree bore a single white apple, and into a courtyard that should not have existed. The building rose like a cathedral carved from fog, towering, seamless, windowless. Its walls bore no stone or brick only, endless panels of cold gray velvet stitched with the shapes of lilies and bones. She found Elsie among the others, standing at attention before a long corridor of dark-framed portraits. Clara rushed forward, grabbed her niece's arm. "We have to leave." Elsie turned. "We're already here." "No, darling. This place isn't real. It's more than real," came a voice behind her. Clara spun. Adalisa Crown stood at the corridor's mouth. Clara had expected some shriveled witch, something broken, stitched together. But the woman before her was perfect, statuesque, impossibly still. Her gown shimmered like pearl dust, and her eyes held all the cruelty of carved glass. "You don't belong here," Clara said. Adliz, a smile. "Belong wherever she is," she said, gesturing to Elsie. "She's a child," Clara said. "She is a vessel," Adalisa replied. "Just as I was. Just as all the Hollow girls were." She stepped closer. "Would you like to know what made me?" Clara tried to speak. Her mouth wouldn't open. Adalisa placed one finger against her forehead, and Clara remembered. A village burned for beauty, a child locked in an attic, taught to recite from broken mirrors, a girl forced to smile as her teeth were filed to match, a queen's, a finishing school where punishment meant plucking your own hair, and Adalisa, age 9, watching it all, learning, memorizing, until she could no longer tell where pain ended and grace. The tower fell, but it did not shatter. It folded, wall by wall, like the creases of a gown being smoothed after prayer. Hollow turned in on itself. The velvet corridors bled gray threads, the portraits melted into black oil, and the air filled with a sound like applause made of knives. Clara ran, Elsie beside her, the girl's small hand locked tight in her own, barefoot on stone that trembled like the skin of a waking beast behind them. The mirror, girl the butcher's daughter, was already gone. Or perhaps she had never fully existed in the flesh. Perhaps she had only ever been the scream. Behind the glass, they reached the gate. The iron groaned under the weight of unraveling magic. The letters HS curled tighter, as if resisting their own destruction. Elsie pushed first. The gate didn't move. Clara grabbed the bars. They were no longer iron. They were bone. "Elsie," Clara gasped, "you have to let go." The girl blinked. Up at her. "Let go of what?" "The thread she tied to you. The thing that feels like obedience. It isn't strength. It's control." Elsie hesitated, then slowly, achingly. Her hand opened. The gray ribbon that had been tied around her wrist drifted to the ground. The gate opened. Outside, the fog had lifted, and with it, so had the spell. They were back in the orchard behind the house. The tower was gone. The trees were bare. The grass was flattened in a wide, circular ring, as though something enormous had stood there only moments ago. Elsie dropped to her knees. She sobbed not from grief, but from release. Clara knelt beside her, wrapped her arms around the girl, and held her until breath returned to rhythm. "I'm sorry," Elsie whispered. "It wasn't your fault. I believed her, I know." Clara looked up at the clouds. I did too, but the war wasn't over. Because Adalisa Crown had not died with the school. She had simply changed form, and the mirror wasn't gone. It had cracked but not crumbled. Later that night, Clara found the largest shard still pulsing with heat. She wrapped it in black velvet and buried it deep beneath the garden shed, under a lattice of salt, silver, and old prayers. But her dreams that night were not her own. In a flat in Liverpool, a girl named Leela Hemsworth opened a box she'd found in a second-hand shop. Inside was a compact mirror, silver, delicate. When she opened it, her reflection smiled before she did. In a boarding school in Norfolk, a girl named Beatrice saw a face behind her in the bathroom mirror, a woman in gray lace, pressing her finger to her lips. Beatrice blinked. The woman was gone, but a gray ribbon had appeared, tied to the tap. And in the attic of Hollow House, the cuckoo clock began ticking again. But it no longer told time. It told names, a new one every hour. Girls who hadn't yet been taken. Girls who hadn't yet looked. Elsie stayed with Clara for the summer. They baked bread that didn't rise and made tea too strong. They built jigsaw puzzles with missing pieces and tried not to speak of mirrors. But one day, as August waned, Elsie stood at the window and asked, "Do you think it ever really ends?" Clara paused before answering. "No." "Then what do we do?" We interrupted, and so the Hollow sisters began. Clara wrote first. She published an anonymous letter in the Ladies' Gazette, warning mothers to watch for gray ribbons, strange mirrors, whispers of beauty tied to pain. She received only one reply, from a woman in Wales who'd lost her daughter. "I think she's not dead," the letter said. "I think she's perfect." The stories came slowly. A girl found with lace stitched into her skin. Another with mirror slivers under her tongue. A third who danced in her sleep, lips whispering the phrase, "Elegance is obedience." Clara created a map not of places, of fractures, where girls had disappeared, where mirrors had cracked, where Hollow had touched. The pattern was spreading, and Adeliza had found new vessels. She no longer needed a school. The world was her school. Every makeup counter, every dressing room, every photo filter promising to slim the face and soften the eye. Her voice was soft now, but everywhere, and the girls who heard her began to fade. Elsie, now stronger, wrote poems, angry, clear, and strange. She sent them to newsletters and zines. Most never replied. One did. The zine was called Smoke and Stitch. Its editor, a girl named Marla. She, too, had seen the woman in gray. Together, they made a pact to find the other girls, to break every mirror, to bury Adeliza crowned again, and again, and again, and again. Meanwhile, in a shop in Vienna, a woman sold a looking-glass to a man who wanted to gift his daughter something beautiful. She told him it was antique. She told him it was rare. She did not tell him it once belonged to a school that no longer had a name. As the man left, the woman whose hair was silver and eyes like ash smiled faintly. And behind her, in the mirror's reflection, Adeliza smiled too. They called themselves the Hollow Sisters. Though none of them were related by blood, they were joined by something colder, darker, and deeper than kinship. They had all seen her, some through glass, some in dreams, some in the thin silence between the last bell of school and the whisper of night. They were not many, not yet, but they were enough. It started in the attic. Clara cleared the old school files, keeping only what couldn't be traced. Enrollment books, prefect records, a crumbling dress, labeled first prize, composure, all of it reeking faintly of lavender and formalin. She found a ledger, 2. Written in Adeliza Crown's own hand. It did not list grades or punishments. It listed transformations. Beatrice H. Original height, 5'4". Gives final height, 5 feet 2 inches. Lucinda M. Original laugh. Loud gives final. Muted Harriet P. Freckles. Visible gives final. Scrubbed and at the bottom. Clara W. Pending. Clara burned the page. But it didn't curl. The ink shimmered. The parchment hissed. Then it vanished into smoke, releasing a scent like crushed rose petals soaked in vinegar. "That's her magic," Elsie said from behind. "It doesn't die. It perfumes itself." Clara looked down at her hands. They were shaking, but they were still hers. That was something. Elsewhere, the spread continued. Girls began speaking in rhymes they didn't remember learning. They walked in time with clocks that had no gears. Some began refusing food not out of fear, but devotion to an unseen mistress. "She watches me in the mirror," wrote a girl from Devon. "I do not wish to displease, but the Hollow Sisters were watching too. They didn't have spells, not the kind Adeliza used, but they had other things. A lace cutter who could see through glass without reflection. A chemist's daughter who brewed mirror-dueling elixirs from vinegar, salt, and the bones of dead crows. A twin who had lost her sister to the mirror, and now saw what her siblings saw at night, together. They hunted fragments, not just glass. Ideas. The idea that to be still is to be pure, The idea that silence is dignity. The idea that beauty only blooms when pain prunes it. Elsie's poem Ode to a Crooked Smile went viral in a girls' boarding forum. It was silly, sharp, and impossible to read without snorting. She got hate mail for it. Why glamorize ugliness? One message sneered. Elsie replied, because ugliness doesn't trap girls in mirrors. In a small town outside Bath, Clara met a girl named Sylvie who claimed to have spoken directly to Adeliza. Not in a mirror, but in a dream. She offered me grace, Sylvie whispered. Said it would hurt only at first. She has teeth like pearls and a voice like milk. I told her no. She left, but she took my shadow. Clara checked. Sylvie's shadow flickered as if underwater in Wales. A statue of Adeliza Crown appeared overnight in a public garden. Marble, perfect hands, folded in prayer. Beneath it, carved in elegant script, obedience is a form of love. Clara, Elsie, and Marla defaced it before sunrise, with tar, chalk, and 1,000 angry girl words. One night, the cuckoo clock in Hollow's ruined. Attic rang dot. It had not rung in months. Its hour hand pointed nowhere. Its minute hand pointed to the garden. Clara lit a candle. She followed the trail of ribbons left in the dirt. They twisted around fence posts and daisies. She reached the shed. The buried mirror shard was gone. Adeliza had reclaimed a part of herself, and with it, she was making something new. Girls in different countries began waking with lace marks on their wrists. Not tied, grown. Small gray spiders, silent, peered in their rooms, spinning webs on makeup, mirrors, and compact lids. One girl from Denmark plucked a spider off her mirror. It bit her. She smiled for 3 days, and then disappeared. All that remained was a faint smell of lavender and dust. The Hollow. Sisters met underground now. In ink and whispers, they sent letters through coded phrases in popular magazines. A recipe for mirrorless egg custard. A crossword whose clues spelled out she does not eat. She consumes, and slowly, a resistance formed. Girls met in libraries, under train tracks, in changing rooms, with mirrors carefully covered by scarves. They began chanting their own spells. Not in Latin, in laughter dot, in crooked dances, in defiant songs, sung off-key, and too loud, ADE, LIZ, A hated it. One night, Clara sat at her window and stared into a mirror she hadn't covered. Adelis appeared behind her. I had such hopes for you, she murmured. I had hopes for myself too, Clara replied. You're too clever to win, and you're too pretty to last, Adeliza. Expression darkened. You think I care about my beauty? No, Clara said softly, but your prison does. She turned the mirror toward the moon. Its light cracked the glass. Adeliza vanished in a wail of frost. Clara collapsed, but smiled. A new Hollow sister joined the circle that week, a girl who had once sharpened her teeth to look delicate. Now she used them to bite back. Adeliza did not live in the waking world. Not fully. Not anymore. Her reign stitched itself into ribbons of dreams. The web spun across sleep and silence to fight her. They would have to enter that world, and no one who entered had ever come back. Quite right. It began with the old trick of girls in danger, sleeping in shifts. But tonight, all 5 of the Hollow sisters would sleep together. Marla prepared the salt circle, etched in chalk on the attic floor. Elsie added, crushed. Mirror dust reclaimed from Adelisa's cursed frame and mixed it with ash from a burned corset. Clara brought the last piece, a silver teaspoon once used by Adeliza Crown. It was bent. The sisters held hands. They did not speak. They slept. They woke into darkness. But it wasn't night. It was a parlor. The floor was checkerboard marble. The walls were velvet, the color of bruises. Every frame held a portrait of a girl smiling just a little too tightly. In the center of the room stood a door without a handle, engraved across it in cursive. If you seek her, enter gracefully. That means backwards, whispered Marla. Or barefoot, murmured Elsie. Clara didn't speak. She turned, stepped backward, and passed through the door. Inside was not one room, but many. A library where the books wept when opened. A schoolroom with desks facing inward. Girls seated with mouths sewn shut by golden thread. A dining hall where no one ate, just chewed petals and praised the quiet, the hollow. Sisters pressed forward. Each door required a price, a story, a scar, a secret never told aloud. Elsie whispered how she once bruised her knees, pretending to pray, just so she wouldn't get detention. Marla admitted she'd taken sugar cubes from her mother's vanity and sucked them to stay thin. Clara gave up the truth of what she saw the night Adeliza disappeared, herself reflected with hollow eyes. Already fading. Finally, they reached the center. It was not a throne. It was a dressing room, and Adeliza stood at its mirror, brushing her hair with a comb made of frost. "You took your time," she said without turning. "Give up," Clara said. "I already gave up," Adeliza replied. "That's how I became eternal." Her reflection turned, but she did not. "Look," she said. "See who you could become." The mirror flared. Clara saw herself, elegant, poised, silent, unburdened by thought or appetite. She wore a dress made of apologies. "No," said Elsie, behind her, but Clara stepped forward. Adeliza smiled. Just then, the youngest sister, Liddy, took out the thing she'd hidden in her sleeve. A mirror shard from the original frame, stolen before its burial. She held it to the main mirror like a knife. "I don't want to become," she said. "I want to be." And she pressed the shard into the reflection. Glass screamed. Adeliza staggered. Her hands turned pale as wax. The mirror cracked, then splintered, then pulled inward as though breathing its final breath. Clara grabbed Liddy's wrist. "We have to go now." "But she's not dead," Marla said. "She doesn't have to be," Elsie answered. "We just have to wake up." The dressing room began to melt, not in fire, but in grace. Clara could feel her back straightening unnaturally. A voice whispered in her ear, "We could be perfect." She bit her tongue. The taste of blood grounded her. She clutched the silver spoon in her coat pocket. Not a weapon, but a memory. And memory was stronger than magic. They ran through corridors of velvet fog. They jumped from a staircase that twisted. Into bone, they fell into black. And woke. All five sat upright in the attic. The candle had burned down. The chalk circle was smeared, but they were alive, and for the first time in months, no one's reflection moved when they didn't. For 3 weeks, the mirror dreams stopped. No girls disappeared, no shadows lingered. A silence, pure and real, settled over Hollow. But Clara knew better than to think it was done. Adeliza had not been defeated, only cracked. Her grip loosened, but her whispers still echoed in girls too tired, too hungry, too eager to please. The Hollow sisters would keep watch. They were not warriors, they were. Remember Urs. And the best way to remember, as Clara said in the journal she began that morning, was to live loudly. 2 months passed, in Hollow no footsteps crept behind curtains. No laughter echoed from empty wings. No one vanished in still. Clara Hollow did not feel safe. She knew it wasn't over. She knew Adeliza Crown was waiting, watching, biding her grace beneath the floorboards of dreams. It was Liddy who found the envelope, pinned to the gatepost. Thick parchment, no stamp. On the back, a wax seal in the shape of a hand mirror. Clara opened it with garden scissors. Inside was a single folded letter. "My dearest Clara, how you've grown. You and your little band of unravelers. Brava, truly, you've torn a seam in the gown of eternity. And for that, you deserve a bow. But you've made one mistake. One every girl makes eventually. You believe that because you have woken. You are free. But grace, dear girl, is not a dream. It is the only thing that endures. Come, the mirror awaits. The Hollow." Sisters met that night under candlelight. "Is it bait?" Elsie asked. "Of course," said Marla. "But it's also an invitation." "We don't have to go," Liddy said. Clara looked down at the letter. "We do." They didn't sleep this time. They walked, through corridors, long abandoned, downstairs that hadn't been swept in decades, to a basement once used for punishment and penance. They pushed aside the old linen press, revealing a door made of soot wood. Clara held the knob. "You don't have to follow," she told them. You don't have to ask, Marla said, and they entered. The room was colder than logic. Frost rimed the ceiling. In the center stood a new mirror, not gilded, not carved, just a circle of black glass, framed in dull silver. Adeliza waited on the other side. Not as a queen, as a girl, alone, barefoot, hair undone, eyes wide. She looked younger than any of them remembered. More real. I never wanted to rule, Adeliza said, voice muffled by the glass. I just wanted to stay. Clara stepped forward. You did this to protect yourself. Adeliza nodded. Girls vanish. We always have. I made something no one could vanish from. Not even me. Marla's voice was soft. But it costs everyone else their lives. Adeliza pressed her hand to the glass. Let me out, she whispered. Or come in. Either way, let's end this properly. The Hollow sisters stood in a circle. Each held a token, a string of hair, a spoon, a corset ribbon, a mirror shard, a sliver of chalk. Together, they spoke. Not a spell, a truth. We are girls who remember. We are girls who won't disappear. We are girls who will not be beautiful if it means being silent. And the glass shattered, not into shards, into petals, each black as night, soft as velvet, falling like snow. When the dust cleared, Adeliza stood among them, real, mortal, and very, very quiet. She wept. For hours, she wept. They did not comfort her. They let her cry. That too was a kind of grace. The mirror was buried the next morning, in a box of pine and salt, beneath the willow tree near the oldest dormitory. No markers, no prayers, just the earth swallowing silence. Adeliza did not speak for days. She stayed in the room. They gave her curtains open, windows cracked to let the wind in. Clara visited on the fourth morning. You can't stay, she said gently. Adeliza, I nodded. I know. Where will you go? Where girls go when they no longer want to be girls, she replied. Where's that? Adeliza smiled for the first time. Forward. The Hollow sisters stood by the gate as she left. She wore a green coat. Her steps were uneven, like someone learning how to move again. Liddy handed her a small packet. A spoon, she said, for when you forget to eat. Adeliza tucked it into her coat and walked. Years passed. The Hollow finishing school changed. There were fewer corsets, more laughter. The mirrors reflected what they were meant to. Truth. Sometimes a girl would wake from a dream and cry. Sometimes a window would fog over for no reason. But nothing ever reached through the glass again, because the Hollow sisters never stopped remembering. And that is what kept them safe. 30 years later, a child in a different city, far away, found an old hand mirror at a market stall. It was silver, round, and cool to the touch. She smiled at her reflection, but in the corner of the glass, the silver bloomed slightly like frost. Her mother took it from her gently. We'll get another, she said, a safer one. And they walked on. The frost melted,